You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I welcome indeed the President, and I thank the Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, Mr. Pasco, for his briefing. And at the outset, in view of the tragic earthquakes of this morning, allow me to convey through the permanent mission of China the sympathy of the Lebanese people to the people of China. Mr. President, there has never been as much international consensus on the parameters of an Arab-Israeli peace. Yet Israel is more than ever intentionally taking unilateral, illegal actions that aim at predetermining the outcome of negotiations, changing the reality on the ground, and rendering almost impossible the two-state solution. The Israeli government persistently continues to disrupt the peace efforts of the American administration, including through the expansion of settlements, in particular in East Jerusalem, on top of the ongoing settlement activity in the West Bank under the pretext of so-called natural growth, despite its claims to stop settlement activities for 10 months in the West Bank. The Arab states on March 3rd reiterated their support to the American peace efforts. The U.S. Middle East envoy, Senator George Mitchell, announced the agreement on proximity talks. Yet, Israeli authorities adopted a plan on March 9 to add 1,600 settlement units in East Jerusalem during a bid for peace visit by American Vice President Joe Biden. Words of condemnation came from all over the globe: the Secretary General, the American administration, the Quartet, and many others. However, the Israeli government cracked down on peaceful Palestinian civilian demonstrations in the West Bank and allowed for the criminal behavior of its settlers, resulting in the death of 4 Palestinians. Moreover, the Israeli Prime Minister declared on March 21st that, I quote, "settlement activity in Jerusalem will not stop," and that, quote, "it's like building in Tel Aviv." Even at the time when the American president was receiving Mr. Netanyahu in Washington on March 23rd to discuss ways to move the peace process forward, the Israeli authorities confirmed another illegal East Jerusalem project for 20 residential units in the Shepherd Hotel compound in a neighborhood populated mostly by Palestinians. The Israeli paper Haaretz was told on March 11 by Israeli planning officials that some 50,000 new settlement housing units in Jerusalem neighborhoods beyond the Green Line are in various stages of development and approval. The officials added that Jerusalem's construction plans for the next decades are expected to focus on East Jerusalem, and that such plans for some 20,000 apartments are already in advanced stages of implementation. Mr. President, Israeli designs don't only target the Palestinian-occupied land in the West Bank, but also the Palestinians themselves, in a bid to open the door for what could be a new wave of ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from their homelands. A new Israeli military order has come into force this week. With this new order, tens of thousands of Palestinians deemed, quote-unquote, infiltrators will automatically become criminal offenders liable to expulsion. Palestinians most likely to be targeted under the new rules are those whose ID cards bear home addresses in the Gaza Strip. But infiltrator could also apply to Palestinian residents of Jerusalem. And most ironically, yes, Mr. President, most ironically, is that the infiltrator category could also apply to previously displaced or refugee Palestinians who had been able to return to their very own towns and villages in the West Bank. Allow, Mr. President, as well to draw your attention to the suffering of children from Israeli practices. the Israeli human rights group, B'Tselem, told the Associated Press on March 9 that Israeli police are improperly arresting Palestinian boys in nighttime raids in Jerusalem. In affidavits to B'Tselem, 6 boys, aged between 12 and 14, described arrest raids involving around a dozen heavily armed military police surrounding their homes, handcuffing them, and leading them to the cells where they were slapped, kicked, and told by interrogators to confess if they wanted to go home. One of the boys, Ahmad, 12 years old, said in an affidavit, "I was made to kneel and face the wall, and every time I moved, a man slapped me across the neck." Allow me to repeat, Mr. President. One of the boys, Ahmad, 12 years old, said in an affidavit, "I was made to kneel and face the wall, and every time I moved, a man slapped me across the neck." Mr. President, let's not forget also the plight of more than 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli prisons and detention centers, most of whom are civilians. In our continuing effort to put names on the faces of some of those not to be forgotten Palestinians in order to recall their suffering and to help, maybe help, put an end to their captivity, I'd like to mention today the name of Nawaf Salam, a 54-year-old Palestinian from Gaza, who has been in captivity for 24 years and prevented from seeing some of his children for the past 5 years. In this regard, we recall that thousands of those prisoners carried out a hunger strike on April 7th, protesting the bad treatment they received from the occupying authorities. Similar hunger strikes are planned for the 17th and 27th of this month. In Gaza, we are into the second 1,000 days of the Israeli blockade. The Foreign Minister of Ireland, the first such EU official to visit Gaza in more than a year, described in late February the blockade as a quote-unquote medieval siege, and concluded that, I quote, "The tragedy of Gaza is that it is fast in danger of becoming a tolerated humanitarian crisis, a situation that most right-thinking people recognize as utterly unacceptable in this day." The Israeli blockade is illegal, immoral. Its disastrous effects on the civilians in Gaza are reprehensible. This blockade must end now. So must the Israeli indiscriminate aerial bombing of Gaza that continues to cause death and destruction. We believe that the Security Council should closely monitor the developments pertaining to the report of the fact-finding mission into the deadly war on Gaza that Israel launched at the end of 2008, known as the Goldstone Report, in particular because we trust that this Council, that all Council members will never tolerate impunity. In this regard, we welcome the March 25th decision of the Human Rights Council calling for independent and credible investigations into the serious violations of international humanitarian and human rights law reported by the fact-finding mission, and establishing a committee of independent experts to monitor the independence, effectiveness, and genuineness of the investigations and their conformity with international standards. Mr. President, we believe that any future negotiations, and in whatever format, must concentrate on the final status issues, and specifically the borders, including in Jerusalem, in short specified timeframes, and not only focus on confidence-building measures. We further believe that a just, comprehensive, and lasting solution for the Middle East conflict should be based on Security Council resolutions 242 and 338, the Madrid Terms of Reference, the principle of land for peace, and the Arab Peace Initiative. In this regard, we welcome the affirmation by the Secretary General and that of the Quartet on March 19th that peace talks should lead in 2 years to the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. That is by March 2012. We also reaffirm that all measures and actions taken by Israel to alter the legal and demographic status of the territories it occupies since 1967, including the Syrian Golan, are null and void and have no legal effect whatsoever as per numerous resolutions adopted by this Council. As for the situation in Lebanon, we reaffirm our commitment to Resolution 1701 of 2009 in its entirety and renew our pledge to work closely with UNIFIL. Thank you, Mr. President.